Before salt shakers, before kitchens, before packaged food, before trade routes, before taxes, before empires, humans were already searching for one white mineral their bodies could not live without. Before anyone sprinkled salt over food for taste, ancient humans tasted it in blood, clay, mineral springs, animal organs, and the crust left behind when water dried on stone. Salt was not a seasoning at first. It was survival, a signal, a craving, a biological alarm, a message from the body saying, "Find this," or something inside you will begin to fail. Today, salt is ordinary. It sits on tables. It hides in bread. It is inside snacks, sauces, soups, meat, cheese, and almost every processed food you can buy. You reach for it without thinking. You shake it over food before you have even tasted the first bite. The whole action takes 2 seconds. But for most of human history, salt was not easy. It was not cheap. It was not everywhere. It was hidden in landscapes, a salt lick here, a mineral spring there, a dried lake bed, a salty plant, the blood of a freshly killed animal, the organs of prey still warm from the hunt. That was how ancient humans found sodium. Not in a jar, not in a packet, not on a restaurant table, but inside the world itself. So why did humans start searching for salt? The answer begins inside the body. Your body needs sodium. Not as a luxury, as a requirement. Nerves use it to send signals. Muscles need it to contract. The heart depends on electrical balance. Fluid inside and outside cells depends on it. Too little sodium, especially in dangerous conditions, can become life-threatening. Your body knows this at a level deeper than thought. That is why salt does not feel like an ordinary taste. It feels necessary. The craving is ancient. It is not only culture, it is biology remembering scarcity. For hundreds of thousands of years, Homo sapiens did not have salt as a clean substance they could collect in sacks, store in jars, or trade across deserts. They had hunger for it. They had memory of places. They had animal behavior to watch. They had landscapes to read. And sometimes, they had nothing. So the first salt hunters were not miners. They were observers. They watched animals. Now place the first map point in the wild landscapes, where animals still seek minerals today. Elephants travel to mineral-rich places and break salty material from caves or earth. Deer lick salt from roads and rocks. Gorillas and other animals seek sodium-rich plants, soils, or water sources. Large herbivores often go out of their way to find salt, because plant-heavy diets can leave them short of sodium. Ancient humans would have noticed this. They were close observers of animals because their survival depended on it. Where animals returned again and again, humans paid attention. A herd gathered near a spring. A track led to exposed clay. Animals licked a rock face. Something about that place mattered. So humans followed, not because they understood chemistry, but because they understood pattern. The animals came here for a reason. The body felt better after tasting the clay. The meat from certain places tasted different. The spring left a sharpness on the tongue. That was the first lesson. Go where the animals go. Let the landscape show you where the salt is. If your body needed a mineral and you had no map, no science, and no storage jar, would you watch the animals that needed it too? For early humans, salt was not evenly distributed. Some regions had mineral springs, salt lakes, salty soils, or coastal sources. Others did not. Inland groups far from the sea could face real difficulty. Meat and organs helped. Blood helped. Certain plants helped. But when diets shifted by season, climate, and availability, sodium could become a quiet pressure. Not always a dramatic crisis. More like a background need. A craving never fully satisfied. That pressure shaped behavior. It made people remember certain places. It made rare mineral sources valuable. It made groups share. In small foraging communities, high-value resources were often not treated like ordinary food. Honey, fat, meat, and mineral-rich foods could move through the group, because survival was cooperative. If one person found something rare and essential, the benefit did not stay with one body. It spread. A salt lick was not only a place, it was group knowledge. A mineral spring was not only water, it was memory. Picture a group of early humans moving through a dry valley in East Africa. The rain has been poor. Animals have moved away. Children are tired. One older woman remembers a bend in the valley, where the soil turns pale after drying. She has seen animals stop there. She remembers the sharp taste of the clay. The group follows her. They reach the place. The earth has a faint white crust. They scrape it with stones and fingers. They taste the mineral soil. It is not clean like table salt. It is bitter, earthy, harsh, but the body understands it before the mind does. Relief, not pleasure exactly, relief. That is what salt was for most of human history. Find it, taste it, remember it, share it, move on. But everything changed when humans changed food itself. For hunter-gatherers, sodium often came from animal foods, organs, blood, and natural mineral sources. The exact amount depended on place and season. There was no single ancient diet, but food was still tied to the landscape. Then agriculture arrived, and agriculture created one of the strangest nutritional problems in human history. Grain feeds people. Wheat, barley, rice, millet, and other crops helped populations grow. They made villages possible. They made storage possible. They helped build cities, states, taxation, and civilization. But grain is low in sodium. A diet built more heavily on cereals can give calories, while failing to answer the body's salt craving. That matters, because early farming did not simply add food. It changed what food contained. The hunter might find sodium in blood and organs. The farmer could grow fields of grain and still crave something missing. So farming helped create a new relationship with salt. Salt stopped being something humans only found. It became something they had to produce. Now move the map to northeastern Romania. At Poiana Slatinei Lunca, near salt springs in Neams County, archaeologists found some of the earliest strong evidence for deliberate salt production, dating to around 6050 to 5500 BC. This was not an empire, not a city, not a state bureaucracy. These were early Neolithic communities, and yet they were already doing something highly organized. They were using brine from salt springs and heating it to produce salt. Ceramic vessels broke under heat. People kept making more. Fragments accumulated. The site shows repeated, deliberate activity. This is where the story changes. Salt was no longer just discovered, it was manufactured. Humans had learned to take salty water and turn it into crystals. That is an enormous step, because once salt becomes crystals, it can move. It can be stored, carried, shared, traded, hidden, taxed, stolen, controlled. A mineral that once belonged to a spring could now travel with people. Picture Lunca 8,000 years ago. The air is cold. People carry heavy pots toward a salt spring. They fill them with brine. They place them near fire. They wait while water disappears into steam. The pots crack from heat. They make more pots. Finally, white crystals remain. Someone scrapes them carefully, wraps them, carries them away. That moment is not just cooking. It is not just craft. It is the beginning of the salt economy. A body's craving has become technology. A need has become production. A spring has become a center. And once salt could be produced, it became one of the first substances humans could organize society around. Lunca was not alone in the larger pattern. Across the ancient world, different societies learned to harvest salt in different ways. Some boiled brine from springs. Some evaporated seawater. Some scraped salt from dry lake beds. Some mined rock salt. Some used salty plants, ash, or mineral-rich earth. The methods changed with geography, but the reason stayed the same. Humans needed sodium, and settled life made reliable access more important. In China, salt became one of the great resources of state power. Chinese communities developed sophisticated salt production over time, including brine wells, boiling systems, and later large-scale state control. In many periods of Chinese history, salt was not just food, it was revenue, a resource governments watched closely because everyone needed it. In the Andes and along coastal regions of the Americas, salt also became part of local production and exchange. Near seas, deserts, salt lakes, springs, and mountains, humans kept discovering the same truth. Where salt appears, people return. Where people return, trade begins. Where trade begins, power follows. Now move the map to ancient Egypt. The Egyptians used natron, a naturally occurring sodium-rich mineral mixture, in mummification. Natron dried the body. It helped preserve it. It carried ideas of purity, dryness, and protection. Salt and sodium compounds were not only eaten, they entered religion, death, and the afterlife. That is important, because once humans understood salt's power to preserve meat, fish, hides, and bodies, Salt became more than nutrition. It became a weapon against decay. Before refrigerators, salt fought rot. Before modern preservation, salt kept food from disappearing too quickly. Before embalming became symbolic, sodium-rich minerals dried flesh and delayed corruption. Salt made time slow down. That is why it became sacred in so many places. It could preserve food, preserve bodies, preserve offerings, preserve life through winter, travel, drought, and distance. A mineral that keeps life from spoiling will never remain ordinary for long. Now move the map across deserts. In West Africa, salt became one of the great engines of long-distance trade. Saharan rock salt, especially from places like Tagaza, moved south across the desert toward the Sahel, and cities such as Timbuktu. Gold, cola nuts, textiles, grain, and other goods moved through trade networks. In some places and times, salt could be so valuable that writers described it as worth its weight in gold. That sounds impossible to a modern person with a cheap packet of salt in the kitchen. But imagine living far from the sea, far from salt springs, in a hot climate, eating a diet that needed supplementation. Gold shines, salt keeps bodies alive. Gold can decorate a king, salt can preserve meat, feed animals, support human bodies, and make survival possible. In the right place, salt could be more than precious. It could be necessary. This is how salt helped build roads across emptiness. Caravans moved through heat and danger carrying slabs of rock salt. Camels crossed landscapes where a mistake could kill. Cities grew rich from controlling routes. A white mineral cut from desert earth became part of the economy of kingdoms, and that pattern repeated across history. Where salt was scarce, power gathered around it. Where power gathered, rulers taxed it. Salt became political because the body made it unavoidable. You can refuse luxury. You can survive without gold. You can live without spices. But you cannot live without sodium. That is why governments loved salt. A tax on salt is a tax on necessity. Now move the map to Rome. There is a popular story that Roman soldiers were paid directly in salt, and that this created the word salary. The real history is more complicated. The word salary is linked to the Latin salarium, a payment or allowance associated in some way with salt or money for salt. But the simple image of Roman soldiers receiving bags of salt as wages is probably too neat. Still, the survival of that connection in language tells us something. Salt was important enough to enter the vocabulary of payment, value, and labor. It was not merely flavor. It was part of how societies thought about worth. Now move to France. For centuries, the French salt tax, the gabelle, became one of the most hated symbols of royal power. It was uneven, burdensome, and deeply resented. People did not hate it because salt made soup taste better. They hated it because salt was necessary. When a government controls a necessary mineral, the tax feels like control over the body itself. That anger became part of the wider resentment that helped feed revolutionary pressure. Now move the map to India in 1930. British colonial rule controlled and taxed salt. Gandhi understood the emotional power of that better than almost anyone. He did not choose salt by accident. He chose it because every person understood it. Rich or poor, Hindu or Muslim, farmer or worker, salt touched every tongue. The Salt March to Dandi was not a protest about seasoning. It was a protest about the right to basic necessity. A handful of salt became a political weapon, not because salt was rare in India, but because access to it had been controlled. That is the deep power of salt. The body needs it. The state taxes it. The people resist. A mineral becomes a revolution. And then, after thousands of years of searching, boiling, mining, taxing, trading, marching and fighting, something strange happened. Salt became cheap. Industrial mining, evaporation, global shipping, mechanized processing, chemical industry. In a relatively short modern period, salt changed from precious resource to ordinary household item. Today, many people live in a world of sodium abundance. In some countries, the problem is no longer finding enough salt. It is consuming too much of it, especially through processed foods, where salt is added before you ever reach for the shaker. This is one of the strangest reversals in human history. The craving remained. The scarcity disappeared. Your body was built in a world where sodium was worth noticing. A world where a salty taste could mean survival. A world where the brain rewarded you for finding what was rare. But modern food systems placed sodium everywhere. In bread, canned food, sauces, fast food, processed meat, snacks, ready meals. Food that does not even taste extremely salty can still contain large amounts of sodium. The ancient alarm keeps running in a world where the fire has already been put out. This is why salt tells the whole story of modern mismatch. For most of human history, the body said, "Find salt." Now the modern food environment says, "Here it is, inside everything." The craving was useful, the world changed, the biology did not fully update. So when you reach for salty food, you are not simply making a modern choice. You are touching an ancient system, a survival circuit, a memory of scarcity, a need that once sent animals to cliffs, humans to springs, villagers to boiling pots, traders across deserts, kings to taxes, and revolutionaries to the sea. The salt on your table is the end of a very long search. Your ancestors tasted it in blood, in clay, in spring water, in animal organs, in dried lake beds, in crystals scraped from heated brine. They followed animals to find it. They gathered at salt springs to make it. They carried it across landscapes. They preserved food with it. They buried the dead with sodium-rich minerals. They traded it for gold. They taxed it. They resisted taxes on it. They marched for it. And now it sits 2 feet away from you. Quiet, white, cheap, almost invisible. But it was not always invisible. For most of human history, salt was a destination, a reason to travel, a reason to trade, a reason to remember a place, a reason to fight, a reason to obey, a reason to rebel. That is what makes it so strange. The most ordinary thing on your table was once one of the most powerful substances in the human world. Not because it was magical, because it was necessary. Before salt shakers, humans searched the earth for sodium. Before supermarkets, they followed animals to mineral licks. Before factories, they boiled brine until pots cracked. Before empires, villages gathered around salt springs. Before modern politics, kings learned that whoever controlled salt controlled something inside the human body. And before salt became cheap, it helped shape trade routes, taxes, cities, revolutions, preservation, medicine, and memory. So the next time you taste salt, remember what you are really tasting. Not just flavor, not just seasoning, not just something added to food. You are tasting one of the oldest negotiations between the body and the world. The body asked for sodium, the world hid it, and humans spent hundreds of thousands of years learning how to find it, make it, move it, control it, and finally bury it so deeply inside modern food that we forgot it was ever rare. The craving is still there. The search is almost over. And maybe that is the strangest part. For your ancestors, salt was something they had to chase across the landscape. For you, it waits silently on the table. The body still remembers the hunt, but the mineral has already arrived.